Hey, welcome to Lab the Podcast. This is a very special episode of Lab the Podcast because we're celebrating our 200th episode, which is absolutely incredible. And we couldn't think of a better way to do it than to get back together with the very first people that we ever shared time with. All the way back in 2019, we came here to Tampa, Florida, and did the first episode live with Dave and Susan Ward of Buddy Brew, and we were live at Kennedy. We're not on Kennedy tonight, but Dave and Susan, thank you so much for opening the door to Lab the Podcast, and we couldn't do anything but come back to celebrate 200 episodes, so thank you.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on 200 episodes.
Yeah, it's completely awesome, and we're honored to be here. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
We started, the whole project was really inspired by a wonderful guy out in Seattle. His name's Dick Staub, and he's a philosopher, theologian, just an extraordinarily brilliant guy. And a long time ago, way back in the 1900s, he had a podcast in Seattle that was live. And so you could go to a pub in Seattle, and the Kindling's Muse is where you could go and you could sit in this pub with this wonderful guy and have conversations on faith and life and culture. And it was such a beautiful little expression of the gospel popping up in Seattle. And something about that and Lewis's gathering the Inklings and all of these different threads came together in my imagination. I said, I would love in our work to express the life and beauty of the gospel if we could sit down with incredible people and gather people live. That was the original intent, is that all these episodes would be live and we could just get around people whose lives and work give us an expression of the life and beauty of the gospel. So that was the dream. And we started out with that dream, and we needed a place and we needed people whose lives do that. And that's where we intersected with Buddy Brew. We came into town and Buddy Brew felt like home a little bit. It felt so hospitable and beautiful and warm, and you guys, your lives, we'll get into that, just put that on display, even with your brew good, do good. So we knew intuitively that this was the right place, but why did you say yes? I just want to ask you that, like going back to us asking for the ability to come in and set up this kind of shop at Buddy Brew and fill it with people. What was it that made you say yes? Do you just do that to every stranger that asks?
Well, no, but we would never say no to you, Zach. Is the bottom line. I think a lot of it had to do with how we got to know each other and that journey. And then with you guys, miraculously somehow moving to Tampa, it was like, wow, this is awesome. I can't believe Zach and Cammie are actually in Tampa. Of course, we're going to say yes. And we love your ministry. We love everything you're doing with V3 and Life and Beauty and all those things. And I just, we both were like, this is a no-brainer. We got to do it, of course.
Yeah. Well, we always say this is a kind of a classic way to imagine reality, but beauty draws us in, and then it helps us discover what is good, and then we come to know what is true. And I think that was true for us at Buddy Brew. We knew intuitively from a distance, there's something beautiful happening there.
Well,
And then you get in there and you taste it and see it, and you go, okay, this is good. And then you have conversations with the two of you and you go, no, this is deeply true. And so let's get into the story a little bit. 2019, what's changed the most about Buddy Brew since 2019, since that night on Kennedy?
Well, a lot has changed. 2019 was a year of ginormous promise for us. And it was in many respects an incredible year. But if you think about all the things that we went through since 2019, which were really foundationally changing from more of a business perspective than a heart perspective, for sure, but gosh, I mean, there is a pandemic, and storms. I mean, I think Irma was 2019, and that was a big storm, right? And now in the aftermath of, two recent hurricanes, there's been just so much of that. But what's really changed is I think we've opened 3 new locations in that time, Beta Bay, Armature Works, and most recently our USF Cafe. So those are big deals, and in every cafe, if you look at my bald spot, the ring gets a little bit larger, right? They're a lot, So for us, it's been great. And our original vision really wasn't a cafe-driven business. It was really a wholesale business. So kind of by 2019, we'd established that the cafes were really the face of Buddy Brew. They were what people knew Buddy Brew as. And so this idea of hospitality and aesthetics that are just warm and open and almost the feel like you're in your own house kind of thing, is really super important. And obviously, where we compete is on the customer service side of things, but it's also the quality of our product. And we always are pushing that higher. And so from 2019 to today, that quest hasn't changed. Our look and feel of our cafes has, in large part to Susan. But that quest, that push up, and we have a whole thing, we call it EPIC, which is elevate, product, aesthetic, and my gosh, now I forgot. Can we edit
Customer
that?
service.
Yeah, and customer service, yes. Yeah, EPIC. But the idea is to elevate it all, continue that push up, right? For the very reason that we want to create beauty in everything that we do. Since 2019 and all this stuff that we've gone through, especially the pandemic, the business has been a lot harder, and, but, what I've learned, I think, through this thing is that one, I have the most rock star wives in the world and business partners in Susan, and when I want to sit down and quit, she just continues to push. Her grit is just unbelievable. And through her, I've kind of found it in me, and that's what we do is we push. We just keep pushing.
Yeah.
And if you look at kind of like our pathway from the beginning all the way through, it's lined with these milestones that are really important to us. And a lot of those things are like the opening of a cafe or the production facility, expanding, things like that. But for me, the difference, the real thing in those, not the difference, but the real thing isn't even those milestones. It's what's in between those that are the most important, because that is really a roadmap of miracles. It's those in-betweens that all those little things that only God could orchestrate to make these big milestones happen are really the true blessing in this thing. And you don't see those things, but we do. The public wouldn't. And so I would say the fact that we're still here, we're still thriving, we're still pushing, we still have the same passion that we started with, in 2010, is nothing more than just testimony to the goodness and the love of God.
It's you said you were going to get choked up, and that
Oh,
happened
you haven't seen anything yet,
fast.
Zach.
But I wonder, even as I listen to you, if there was a moment in 2020 where you wondered if you were going to make it. I mean, honestly, because
Absolutely.
I remember 2019, our dream was we're going to do these live. We're going to pack 40, 50 people in a tiny, warm coffee shop and have good. And by 2020, we were trying to figure out, should we just pack it up because we can't meet in person? Your whole business model is threatened. Did you ever wonder if you're going to make it?
We did. I mean, 2020 it changed everything. We had to go through some analysis and really step back and remind ourselves, why are we doing this? And I do think that getting back to our why, we asked a few questions. We said, why are we doing this? What are we good at? And how do we do more of that? Yeah. And we really had to seek God through all of those things. And as we, couldn't serve coffee and offer hospitality in the same way, we had to really get creative. Yeah. But I think a lot of clarity of our vision came through that time. God grew our resilience. So I think we look back on that, and in many of the challenging times, even recently with these hurricanes, it is in those struggles that God deepens our faith and, builds some strength in us.
Yeah. was part of why I'm glad we get to have this conversation with you all, because you get to 200 episodes and we're super excited about it, and it feels like one of those milestone moments where it's a big win and
Yes.
so many evidences of God along the way. But when you really do go back and look at the story, you go, okay, there's some times that we maybe the mission drift, and we had to prune, we had to cut back, we had to get back to what we're great at. And we also see it doesn't just happen. And I think a lot of people, that was what I was excited to explore a little bit tonight, of just what does it take to cultivate life and beauty in the world? Because we talk about it in the abstract and we have conversations like this and go, oh, yeah, expressing the life and beauty of the gospel in the world's essential. And we all know that, we all want that, but it's way more than Instagram posts. It's way more than just marketing and branding. Like, there are school teachers who show up and they don't have enough school supplies for their classrooms, and something in them says, what am I great at? What's my why? And I'm going to do it again for the 27th year that they've been a teacher. And that's happening in every city, in every neighborhood. And that's the stuff that I think the potency of the gospel is really the power of the Holy Spirit, when it's not feeling like the wind at your back. So to hear you say those three things, what's our why? What are we great at? What was the third one?
How do we do more of that?
How do we do more of that? These are the things that I want to learn tonight talking to you guys, but I want to go back to hospitality. And Susan, I felt it that first night that you guys brought us into Buddy Brew. There, the iridescent bulbs in the warm room, and all the things aesthetically that you do to make it feel like home. And a lot of people try to do that at a commercial level, and we like buy the things to make it feel like home, and it doesn't work. There's a warmth and a love in your stores that feels, it's not just the aesthetic. So I want to know, what's the secret behind that? And maybe to get at that, who shaped your imagination about hospitality? Is there a story, or you go back in your story, and I'll come to you next, Dave, but who shaped that for you? Where did you first experience that mark of that magic thing that makes you go, I feel like home?
Well, I love hearing that. I think that is incredible that you felt that way, and thank you for sharing that. Um, so my mom and my grandma really demonstrated incredible hospitality. Going back to my grandma, she had a huge family, her and my grandpa, and lots of kids. And we would go visit her in Illinois, and she had a giant kitchen table. And everyone gathered around the kitchen table, and she always, had tons of food. And even if it wasn't good food, like Red Hots and the applesauce,
Yeah.
she just wanted to share her hospitality, and we had so much fun gathering around that table and laughing and telling
Mm.
stories, and there was such warmth in that kitchen. And my mom modeled that. So growing up, our house was the place everybody hung out.
Yep.
So she really demonstrated, and she made amazing meals,
Yeah.
and really demonstrated just that warmth of inviting people in and wanting people to gather and stay for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it came from.
I love that you said it. You had a big table, and that they're in early in your imagination is a big table. I don't know if it's the Atlantic. Somebody just wrote a brilliant, beautiful article and talking about anxiety and loneliness in America. And they were saying the root of this is really even in architecture, as we have transitioned away from dining rooms, and that expression of eating together has been, we say it all the time, Winston Churchill, first we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. So if we take the dining room away, we take the dining table away, and life is moving and transient, and we don't have those. And in some ways, what you're doing is creating space for a lot of people who are moving and transient to find tables. And you walk into Kennedy, and there's this big, beautiful, long table right there. And I've worked at that table next to strangers who end up, seeing a book. What are you working on? What are you reading? And that life on life thing is what makes a city great. It's what makes us feel like there's meaning to our life. Dave, what is it you hear Susan talk about grandma and mom? Was that a stretch for you? Like when you guys came, you've been married how many years?
27.
27 years. Was your hospitality and imagination shaped in the same way, or did you learn something fresh when you guys came together and started cultivating a home?
Well, I think my family was very similar. both Midwestern families, family meals, a house that always had people in them, entertaining, doing all those kind of things. That I grew up with that as well. I learned it, maybe in a different way with Susan and her family, but I would say we both have the gift of hospitality, and really it's a thing in our heart, right? It's a passion that we both have, and having a full house is exciting. It's life-giving. It's not life taking away. And so it for me, no, a stretch, no. Maybe learning different families' ways and customs for sure, but very similar. So I think we both have been gifted with that, with the gift of hospitality, and we try to weave that into everything we do.
Yeah.
And whether it's our shops or our company culture, or even how we treat our vendors, it is a relationship, and in a relationship, you kind of know people. You trust them. You're vulnerable with them. So even in the bad times, and it's like, oh shoot, my rent might be a little late this month. If you have that relationship, it kind of makes those things easier and better, because we both know it'll be okay, right?
Is there something true at your home, hospitality-wise, that you said intentionally, we want that to be true at the shop too? That same value or that same thing that makes hospitality in your home feel a certain type of way. Is there something that you said, hey, we want that to translate?
I don't know if there was something we said, but as we designed our first cafe, one thing that was really important is that people could sit at the coffee bar and talk with us and whoever was behind the counter. And that's been true in every cafe we built. That's been a must-have, that people could sit and interact and talk. And so we knew that was important. And it was interesting when we opened our first little cafe. We didn't know what was going to happen. Were people going to come? What would happen? And but we thought we want it to be comfortable and welcoming, and a place where people want to stay.
Yeah.
And people would sit mostly at the bar. It was Dave and I behind the bar. And we developed some of the sweetest relationships. We met people in this community that we never would have had the chance to meet. So it was immediately this experience of building relationships.
Yeah.
Well, one of your maybe the chairman of the board members for sure, Michael Barna, was one of the first.
Yep.
I mean, and he's still in our shops. And so there's these deep relationships that were forged over 14 years, and to this day, when we walk into the shop, we'll definitely see people we know, customers that have been around for a long, long time. And over time, we've even named some of our offerings after some of our customers. The Beverly's Biscuit is one of them.
I love that. I was there the other day on Kennedy, and we're in the midst of this incredible project where we're taking my book and turning it into a symphony. And the conductor the composer was in town, Constantine. So we ended up at Buddy Brew, and we sit down, and he was signing the one page of the composition to give to some of our friends. And we just laid it out on the counter at Buddy Brew, and the people working were looking at it, and the people next to us were looking at it. And we've got pictures from that moment.
I love that.
Man, that's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, and then my wife and I the other night stumble in, from the sidewalk and end up at your house, very same way, at this big kitchen bar, talking to Dave and Susan, and life and beauty are being cultivated. And here's what I want to ask next is, it's not lost on me that there's a price paid for that, right? Constantine and I had a huge spread set up there, and drinks were being poured for us. People were literally like leaning in with excitement about what we're doing.
Wow.
And we were able to do that because somebody made a space for us. And it wasn't just a pragmatic space. It was beautiful. That's why we went there. We were drawn to that. And I think hospitality has that. Blake Casper does that in Tampa so well in attending to things like at Oxford, where you're drawn in and you want to stay there.
Yes.
You want to have long conversations. You want to be there. But the other side of that is somebody paid a price for it. It doesn't just happen. For you, and this might provoke more tears, but
probably.
Can you take us back to a moment where you made a costly decision like that for Buddy Brew, and you said, you know what? in order for us to do what we do and do it really well, we're not going to prune something. We're going to spend for it. And maybe it was time, maybe it was energy, maybe it was adding staff. But for you to deliver what you want in that way of being hospitable in our city, what's a price that maybe people wouldn't know was paid?
Oh,
Well,
that's
I
a great
think
question.
it is a great question. It's every build out for us, honestly. And we have looked at that and said, okay, we could strip out a lot of things and do this differently and do sort of a bare bones aesthetic. But we've just made a different choice,
Mm.
and that's been important.
Yeah.
And that's a costly choice. Yeah.
Extremely.
Tremendously
Yeah.
costly.
You talk about Michael Barna in his building or business of building. There's those choices. Even on Beta Bay, I think about this picture of, I think, a surfer in the water out there, and it's framed in a
Yes.
particular way, and it like just pulls your vision out like that. And I always think about that sitting back in that really warm sofa in the back. And those are intentional and costly decisions. What would you say to somebody who's trying to bring back a table to their home, or try, as we're heading into the holidays, Thanksgiving's coming, Christmas is coming, and maybe somebody who grew up with a family who used to have a table, or they have a memory of their grandma cultivating a space like that. And they go, we just lost it, or we don't do that anymore, and I want to bring it back. And they're weighing that cost. What is a simple thing that you would say, hey, this is what we learned about bringing that into the home? What's a simple way that people can curate that kind of hospitality in their home that maybe would surprise them? It's not knocking a wall out or,
Right. Well, I think it starts with the family, right? And, one of the things that's always been very important to us, and it was very woven into each of our families growing up, is this idea of a family dinner, right? Where we all gather together, we all sit down, we all share the day with each other. We do high-lows and, things like that. But it's in those moments where, it's true connection with our family. And I think if you take that idea and you make it a little bit bigger, where now you're inviting friends and other and family into your home, it's the same exact thing. It's those moments of connection that are everything. And that doesn't take a lot, right? But I think most families probably don't have a family meal every day anymore. And it's not that it's easy. That it's a hard, that getting everyone together to sit down for 30 minutes in this busy world we're in is something. But that said, is it really that hard?
Yeah.
And the fruit that comes out of those moments is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I think it's important to not need it to be perfect.
There you go.
So the other night when you guys came to our house was not clean.
It was beautiful.
And there was laundry and if we let that stop us, we would have missed a really sweet, beautiful evening. So I think sometimes we want things to be more perfect than they have to be.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that, because there's a risk there too, right? For you to open up your home unexpectedly, bring some people in. And this is exactly what you did at Buddy Brew, bringing us in from the West Coast to the East Coast and opening up the shop, letting us set up shop. But we just posted up at your kitchen island the other night. And I think it was like 11 o'clock at night, but we left having heard parts of your story that I would have never known. And that what it cost you, I think, was time. Most importantly, we'll never get it back. Like that time you chose to give to us and to allow us to have something that you can make more money, you can make more food, you can make a lot of things happen, but you cannot make more time. And I think to bend the river, as Buechner would say, and create that time, I love that you said it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And to your point, I would say, as you think about the holidays and you think about what's coming up and you listen to this story, this is what we're talking about. I said this before we started, but our hope, if we get a win, it's that the life and beauty of the gospel is expressed in the world. And I don't know if there's a more beautiful or potent place than hospitality. You think about Jesus washing somebody's feet and how just remarkable that was for him to, we use these big words like condescend and come low to do that posture. But you do that in so many ways. You did that for us the other night, right? Like clearing things out and sharing priceless or precious things that bring joy, right? That we do that, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think you've probably learned a million things along the way, but I want to pull on this thread of the stuff that you've learned in between those milestone moments. So, Dave, maybe start with you. If you could say there's a lesson you've learned in this story from 2010 to today in cultivating life and beauty in the expression of Buddy Brew, what do you think you've learned?
Oh boy. Well, one of the toughest stories in the Bible is Job for me. It's one of those things where, uh, it was just trial after trial after trial after trial after trial. But what did he do? He remained completely 100% faithful to God, right? Um, and even though all these terrible things happened to him in the end, it was not just restored, it was made a lot bigger. And so for me, that story has finally kind of, in some of these trials, you feel like, where is he? We were called here. We're here. We're still here. Let me hear from you, whatever, right? It's like that thing. But as you walk through, in between those milestones where all those miracles happen, that's where he is.
Mm.
And he's never let us down. Even in the darkest moments when we thought there is no way there's going to be another day, there is.
Yeah.
And it's a glorious day, and so that's the lesson that I've learned is like, don't forget. That's why I love to have our this roadmap for us, and the spaces in between become so important for me, because that's when he shows up in a way that you never could have imagined. And so the lesson, bottom line, is he is faithful. His truths are 1,000%, billion% real. Don't ever forget them.
Yeah.
Just because it feels in this moment that you're all alone and there's no way forward. It's not true. It's not true.
I hear you say that tonight, and you're in a really beautiful pink shirt, and you got a great wife and a business. And we see, we drive by Buddy Brew. We see, the Chris Godwin stuff that the Bucks are doing promotions with you. And just from the outside, we're like, well, Dave and Susan are winning all the time. You're just teeing up home runs, right? It feels like that sometimes. And I want to just ask you this, Dave. What do you say to the person who's maybe a business person or a dad who is going, I hear Dave saying this today, but if you really knew me, you would know that I'm going home tonight and I don't know how we're going to make payroll. And I don't, help me in my unbelief. What would you say to that person that you've probably been there in that moment, praying and really maybe angry at God or wondering, is he going to come through? Is he going to be faithful? And what was it that helped you get up again the next day? Right? And get from that moment, which is real, and we're not going to skip those moments. We've all had those moments. If you've been engaged in anything meaningful, you have found yourself on the floor going, where are you? Mm-hmm. What would you say to the person that you've learned that helps you get up and go into the next day?
Well, I think that what I would tell that person is it's going to be harder than you ever imagined it would be. Just because you're answering the call doesn't mean that it's going to be, as you said, kind of winds at your back, pushing you forward. It isn't like that at all. So, when you start a business, you have this great idea. The idea almost becomes a life of its in and of itself. And you're excited and you're passionate and you become a little bit successful at it, and boom, boom, boom. But before you know it, it's like, wow, I got to keep books. Like, oh, wow. Okay, cool. Oh, wow. We're growing. We have to hire somebody. Well, we got to train them then. And then, well, what do we do about that? And then, it's all these things. And then there's going to be those big road bumps. There's going to be a pandemic. There's going to be a hurricane. There's going to be nasty people out there that sue you or whatever, right? And you just, at the beginning, you don't ever even think of those things. So walking through these things, for me, is just taught me that, one, he is always there, regardless of what the storm of the day is. And, we talk a lot about it, especially in our vision statement, about this idea of joy that becomes super inspirational, that then is transforming, right? And when you see somebody with true joy, even with the storm swirling all around them in the day, you can't help but like stop and say, well, what does that person know that I don't?
Yeah.
And for me, I hope that's how we walk through these storms, and we try to, for sure. But it's the hope of Jesus. It's the hope of salvation. It's the hope of heaven. It's and we have that, right? And so the storms begin not to matter, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be tough. And it doesn't mean it's not going to the refiner's fire kind of sucks, to be honest, right? Who wants to be refined?
Yeah.
But what comes from refinement? Pure freaking gold,
Yeah.
right? And that is an amazing thing. And so these things, even when those trials come, new business, entrepreneur, right? Just know that there's a reason for all of them. You're being prepared for something bigger, something more.
Yeah. I love that. Just the idea that these things have come, that your faith, which is more precious than gold, could be refined. And it's just that what matters most to me, right? Wins on the board or some formation of a life in union with God that enlarges and enlarges
Oh,
and
my
enlarges.
goodness.
If I had to choose, I'd take that any day of the week.
good.
But the only
100%.
way to get it is through that.
Yes.
Susan, what have you learned about yourself in this journey, right? Maybe your faith, maybe some part of you has enlarged because of this journey. What have you learned about yourself?
I think we've learned so much in this process. Buddy Brew has required patience and perseverance and a lot of trust in the Lord. So I think I've learned how important that surrender is at these moments that we're talking about, these challenges, that when we want to have control over things, I've learned how important it is to surrender. And it's often that when we do get to that point and surrender, that God has something amazing for us. And Dave and I talk about that a lot. In some of the most challenging times, we'll say, God's about to do something great. So I think we've learned to really persevere through that and to trust the Lord.
What does that look like for you? Again, from the outside, I go, okay, I hear you saying that, like surrender. And I can imagine you looking at books or looking at invoices or whatever it is that you're facing. But what does that look like for Susan Ward when you say, no, I choose surrender?
Well, it's prayer and going back to scripture and going back to God's promises. There's some favorite verses that I like to go back to that just remind me of God's goodness and his sovereignty. There's one in Jeremiah about, sovereign Lord, you've created the heavens and the earth with your power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you.
Mm. Mm.
I've claimed that over and over again through so many things. In fact, today even, God brought that up to me again. For so many areas of our life, but absolutely for the business.
Yeah.
So it's going back to those promises that I think strengthen my faith and get me through those challenging times. And then our relationship and our family and friends.
Yeah. How does that work? I mean, you mentioned it earlier. I have this incredible wife and business partner, and you guys are doing both. And so you are trusting God as parents, as partners in a marriage and in a business. How do you do that well? What have you, I mean, maybe I'll, don't throw that to me.
No,
I'm
it's
throwing
fine.
it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, I don't know if we are doing it well. We do
We're
try.
practicing.
We're practicing for
Practice.
sure.
A work in
Getting
progress.
better, maybe. I think it's probably the hardest path you could choose is to partner with your spouse. Um, you know, but
You
I
guys
think,
are doing it too.
yeah,
Yeah.
you guys get it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I do believe that God is the God of unity. And we talked about this today, as a matter of fact. It's like we're not going to make a decision unless there's 100% unity in it.
Hmm.
And so I think that is a really super important thing, whether it's family or business. We have to be in unity. It's a partnership. Now we have different roles, and we have different authority, right? But I think what's important for me to remember is that first and foremost, we're under authority,
Hmm.
right? And then we have authority in certain areas of our lives. But when you step out of those areas, I think that's when there's trouble. And so it's like we're stewards of God's business. Nothing more, nothing less. That's what we are. But it's his business. So when we try and shoulder these kind of, big things, it is far too heavy for anybody.
Hmm.
And so you have to surrender. You have to fall back to God and say, hey, this is where we are. I'm sure we made 100 billion mistakes, but we're here and we've answered the call. So, but we give it back to you because now we're at our end. We can't, and we were never supposed to be carrying it. He carries it. We just go do what he's telling us to do.
Yeah.
Right. And that unity piece is how we really can, I think, one way anyway, is to understand that this is the right decision or the wrong decision. It's been a hard lesson for me to learn, however, that God put Susan in my life for a very specific reason. She is my greatest counselor. He speaks to her, to me, all the time. So if I don't listen and I don't, even when I don't want to, even when I don't like it, even when I disagree, perhaps, I believe there's God's voice there. I just have to, we then have to come together and divine it, like what the real outcome is. And that's a toughie in a marriage and in a partnership, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's made our marriage stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we've had to face and deal with things. You have to really work through things together when you spend this much time together. So I think it's really strengthened our marriage, and we have such different strengths. We have a lot of the same strengths, and then we have a lot of different strengths. And so, Dave, in the very beginning, I don't think I would have ever started this business. It was it was
Yeah.
it was really his leap of faith initially to do this. I don't think I would have taken that risk. And then we were both all in and quit our jobs, and it was crazy.
Still crazy.
But, I think going through this journey together, I mean, you can't help but get, um, strengthen your relationship and get a lot closer through going through a crazy journey like this, which it's been. And we try to keep the boundary of business and family, so we try to not talk about work at home. We don't do that perfectly, but then we also try to make sure that we carve out enough time at work to talk about work.
Yeah.
And that's tough too.
Yeah.
But we do. Yeah. I'm glad you said that because I think that that's super important. Work, it can become all consuming. And when you're both in it to get, it could be the only thing we talk about because it's real.
It's always there. Yeah.
It's always there, right? And so we do try really hard not to.
Yeah.
The kids don't even need the pressure of it, because, there is stress and pressure and anxiety, all those things, they don't need that. They just need consistency. They need, security.
Yeah. I
So
love how you're describing just the partnership, so I think in a modern perspective, post-industrial revolution, post, we bifurcate and fragment so much of our life. And I love the way that you started that. Like that, we always say imagination precedes reason. And how do I imagine the world to be? And originally it was God and man in relationship, doing it together. Cultivate and fill the earth, and you're going to do it in partnership. And I'm going to give you a little place to be and a thing to do, and you're going to be set on your way together to cultivate something beautiful and to develop it, to take what I've made and to make something. And so your story is not so different from the story, right? And sometimes the modern world kind of says, well, that's not the story. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, that's the story. Dave and Susan, Zach and Cammie, Adam, Eve, like a complementary diversity and union that produces something really beautiful in life. That's the story. And you're living it out and we're watching it. And I love that you referenced scripture earlier, to pray and to have the Bible. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's one in the building that it's not separate from. This is the way you live your lives and parent your kids and run your business. All of it is integral. And I think that helps. You mentioned anxiety a second ago, and I was going to ask you how your faith has changed, but maybe I can combine these two because I'm thinking about when you have that Christian imagination of what is reality, right? We hear scriptures that say, be anxious for nothing, right? Like, be anxious for nothing. Cast your cares on me. And then yet we live these things that seem impossible. And I wonder, what have you learned and how has your faith grown to where you've learned to exist in the tension of that? How do I take on big things? And faith is literally being sure of what I hope for and certain of what I don't see. So I'm going to take some big risks and big jumps and step into things that are beyond my control. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not necessarily walking by faith. It's more by sight. But as soon as I enter that, I start to feel that anxiety and that things are too big. What have you learned, or how has your faith changed so that you can walk in that tension a little bit with a greater peace, maybe?
Well, from my perspective, Buddy Brew in and of itself is an impossibility. It just, given where we started and where we are today, there is so to not have God and shout God and his weaving of how this thing has happened would be just a complete and total lie. And so for me, if that's that is the case, but it's that idea that without him, it wouldn't be. I mean, so whatever that next risk is, first of all, the risk is prayed for. There's been a unified decision most of the time. Trust me, and when there hasn't been, not so good.
You learn. You learn.
And so once you get to that point where the decision's made, now it's time. It's like, okay, let's go. And when it doesn't go right, and it usually doesn't, what's that quote by Mike Tyson? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Punch in the face.
Well, we get punched in the face a lot. And so the idea is you have to have a plan. But if you're not bobbing and weaving and the course is changing and all those kind of things, it was probably, that's the whole thing is that so your faith will be tested all along that path. But because of, all this time and all those milestones with all those miracles in between, how can you not know that he's going to come through?
Yeah.
It's 100% true. It just is. So
I
he's going
like
to.
that you said that, and I like that it is good to bring ourselves back to when God has been faithful and just remind ourselves of all of the times that he's been faithful.
Yeah. Isn't that, scripture is that, and this is why, again, it's so rich to just, we use these Christian platitudes like, let the word of God dwell in you richly. But when you've read the Bible, it's a constant testimony over and over. Remember God's faithfulness. Remember he was with you. Remember he was with them. Remember he was with them. Just that constant remembrance.
And they always forgot.
And they always forget. And then somebody there says, yeah,
right.
Hey, as you're walking to your car from the warehouse and you go, no, his strong arm, he's able to do this. But I need that remembrance. And I think it's beautiful that we get to hear this part of your story, right? Again, because we think it's all good business plans and perfectly executed strategies and all these things. But to hear you talk honestly and say, no, marriage is learning to listen to each other and to be true partners. And we don't always get it right. And I hope that's what you're hearing as you kind of listen to this conversation. Because again, the point is, we're so grateful for you. We're so grateful. I wish we had a whole another episode to just talk about your kids and your family. But the way that you all have opened up your heart and been an expression of the life and beauty of the gospel, it's changed lives. I can start to see names and faces of the lives it's changed directly. You've changed lives for your kids, you've changed lives for us personally. And I think about so many people who are drinking coffee, even on the other side of the country, people who are drinking Freedom Roast, and they're literally having a cup of coffee and they're thinking about this story that they heard of you both coming together and saying, you know what, let's create a roast that every time somebody drinks that cup of coffee, there are resources directly deployed to one of these darkest spaces. And so I hope if you're listening, what you're getting is, yes, we want to celebrate 200 episodes of podcast. Yes, we want to celebrate Buddy Brew and you all, but really we want to celebrate what's possible when people live by faith with an imagination that exceeds whatever it is that the thing that you're doing. You're doing coffee, but whatever you're doing, my hope is that this story would translate, because your story is probably really, really similar, and we're in it together. And it isn't easy to cultivate life and beauty, but you're showing us a way forward that's really honest and really beautiful, and we're super, super grateful for it. I want to ask you about Freedom Roast before we run out of time. I know I'm looking at these guys that are doing the production and they're saying, let us go. But we got to talk about it, because we came to you with this dream. And the other night we were having dinner, and you said, Dave, like, we have to do more to fight human trafficking. And you guys started by partnering with us for Freedom Roast. And really the big dream that's audacious is, think of 100,000 people across the country made Freedom Roast their cup of coffee once a day, once a week. But that consumer choice creates a common good that's incredibly powerful and sustainable. And so you have businesses who are aiming in that direction, creating opportunities for people to make a consumer choice to purchase Buddy Brew coffee. So I know why we did that, and we are leaning into that fight for human trafficking, because it's kind of the most broken place that we can imagine. If we're in the beauty world to cultivate life and beauty, the most awful thing that we can imagine is the complete destruction of a human life. What was it about Lab Initiative and the fight against human trafficking that made the two of you lean in and say, yes, we want to be a part of this? Because you don't do it all the time.
Well, Zach, we love what you and Cami are doing. And we're so inspired by you guys. And we were thrilled with this opportunity to partner and to, create a roast with you that could do good in this way, that could help fight human trafficking. Brew Good Do Good is why this company exists. We're all about great coffee, but we are all about doing good in this world as well. And so this was just a no-brainer when you guys came to us with this idea. And so we're honored to partner with you guys. We're excited about the continued growth of Freedom Roast. We're excited that our wholesale partners are ordering it. It's in churches, and it's available, to order online. You can start a subscription of it. So we're excited, and we're looking forward to selling more.
Yeah.
And I think for us as well, it just so happens that Tampa is one of the worst cities in the country. I mean, consistently in the top 5, if not in the top 2, for human trafficking. And to me, that is just heartbreaking that this is happening in our beautiful, awesome city. Because on the outside, you don't really see it, and so we knew we had to do something, and you guys just came up with the idea, and we're like, oh, heck yeah, we're in.
Yeah.
And we hope and pray that it grows and grows and grows, and because it becomes something that really becomes transforming for our city and hopefully well beyond.
Yeah. Well, I think conversations like this help that aim, right? Because we see so many good things. Beauty leads to goodness, helps us know true. That's happening so many different places. And my hope in being able to sit down and talk to you all is to learn from you, but also so that people could get to know a little bit more of the Buddy Brew story, because the coffee is exceptional, by the way. Like, where you are talking about an elevated experience of coffee, the way you source your beans, the way that you choose farmers, all these different things that are happening behind the scenes. It's a true good. So that brew good, do good philosophy is not just in the taste, it's in the quality of what you do. but the aim to impact a social good and to attach that good to justice is pretty remarkable. And there is, again, cost to that. You guys are giving up profit margin so that everybody who makes that consumer choice is participating in the fight against human trafficking. So here's how this works. You mentioned, or Susan mentioned it. Go to Buddy Brew's website, and you can literally go to their website and search the store section so that you can find Freedom Roast. And anywhere in the country, I know there's people in Portland for sure, Seattle, different parts of the country who order Freedom Roast. And literally when you buy a bag of coffee, and when you ship things, they are beautiful too. It feels like the store comes to your house. It's really, really wonderful. So order some of the coffee. It'll get shipped directly to you. And literally you can open up an incredibly beautiful cup of coffee and know that you are drinking in participation to not just something that's beautiful and good, but something that is true, which is that people are not meant to be enslaved. And we can literally set captives free by participating in making these choices. So thank you for making that possible for us. And now, when you think about 2025 and what you're praying for Buddy Brew, one of the things we love to do when we get conversations like this is just invite everybody who listens to join in prayer for what you're praying for. And it's been so fun to hear different people come on this show and be like, yeah, pray for this, right? Because we don't get that always. How can people pray with you? As you think about 2025, what's the thing that we can join and partner with you in prayer for Buddy Brew?
I think the number one thing is that we would seek God's wisdom and that He would continue to use this business for His glory.
She took the words right out of my mouth. That was what I was going to say. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll do it. Join us in that. Let's take Dave and Susan up on that and pray for wisdom and that He would guide. Because I would love to have a 300th episode and look back and go, we were sitting in that place and had no idea what God was about to do. And I think that'll be the case. Dave and Susan, thank you for just the way you express the life and beauty of the gospel, the way you've impacted us and everybody. And let's keep it up. Let's keep this momentum going forward. But we're deeply grateful.
Oh, we're
Thank
grateful
you
for you
for having us, and thank you for all that you do.
Yeah. You guys are amazing.
And
Cheers.
congratulations
Love you guys.
on 200 episodes.
200 episodes. There you go. And we're out.